Hello and welcome to Smoke and Burn. I'm Casey Gresseth, and I'm here today with Shaun White of Buffalo BG. How you doing, Shaun?
Good, Casey. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. So, for any of you guys that caught the social media marketing episode, Shaun did a segment on that with me earlier this year. And if you're on Facebook, I'm sure you've heard of Buffalo BG. You probably have the single most successful Facebook page in BG products world, I would imagine.
That's quite the statement. I mean, I appreciate it. It's definitely a lot of work.
You probably have more friends than the BG Products Inc. page does.
I don't even know where I'm at. I think it was 2,100. I think last I checked.
Man, that's awesome.
2,182. I think I know about 100 of them.
The BG Products Facebook page and Instagram pages attracts just the absolute worst internet trolls. You know, like if there's a group of people that are comfortable with being mean, it's like self-proclaimed technicians online.
Yeah, they're the YouTube masters.
Right.
they got to have somewhere to go to squawk, and I still encourage those guys. I think I said that back when we did that podcast. When was that? It was a while ago, back in December. But
yeah,
I still encourage those guys because it's all right. Let's go. What do you got? And by the end of it, like I said, they either disappear or they become your best friends and invite you in. So
we did so we have a couple of low-level YouTube stars in Wichita. One of them's name is Hoovy's Garage. He does car videos and stuff. And then his mechanic has a Facebook or a YouTube channel called The Car Wizard.
Okay.
So the Car Wizard asked, he's a customer of ours. He asked one of my reps and I to come up and help him do a video about direct injection. And we did a platinum service on his wife's car. And it was a decent experience. You know, the video went pretty good and stuff. But then, God, dude, the comments section,
the trolls.
I got massacred. I mean, just prodded in every different way, from my shirt's too tight to this guy puts his hand in his pocket a lot to I don't believe anything this dude says. He looks like a scumbag.
Right? What's this hipster doing selling the snake oil on TV here? What's going on?
Right.
Yeah, the general public can get a little carried away with the email muscles. It's definitely for sure.
Yeah, what a mess. So I know we went through your work history when we did the social media episode, but can you give us kind of a brief rundown of your career and how you ended up with BG?
Yeah, sure. So kind of the high level overview is I went through tech school right out of high school. 18, I went off to NTI in North Carolina, which was UTI's NASCAR version. Did really well there. Got picked up by BMW for their MSAT program, which is a manufacturer-specific advanced training in Orlando. Went down to Orlando for 6 months, did that, and was picked up by a dealer in Rochester, New York, which is outside my territory now, where I worked for, I don't even know how many years, a good number of years, worked my way up to a master tech and an assistant foreman. And from there, I went on to actually teach at the MSAT program in Orlando for BMW North America. Did that for a couple of years, and somehow got the bright idea to move back to Western New York from Florida to be a service manager at a GM dealer. And I got two little kids, which I'm sure you've seen if you follow my Facebook page. I got two girls, and my wife wanted to have them back here with family. So we moved back, took a job sight unseen as a service manager for GM store, and did that for 2 years. And that's where I got introduced to BG through my rep there. And the rest is kind of history. You know, we talked when we did that previous podcast how I was pretty stubborn and it was a tough sale to even bring BG in because I'm a technician background, man. If it's broke, fix it. And I didn't want anything to do with whatever this voodoo they were selling me in a can because I wanted the labor dollars for fixing it. And it took a good 6 months to get BG in the door. And then I actually turned his job down for almost 6 months myself because I didn't want to be a sales guy. And it really took me doing a lot of homework on my end to kind of just get through the gray areas of what we actually do and figure out that we actually provide a really good service to everybody that's out there. And it ties perfectly into my background from the technical all the way right through the management side. So It's been a fun ride, and I've been with BG over 2 years. It was January of 18 I came on, so it's been fun.
Now, when you were a manager, how mean were you to BG guys on cold calls?
I didn't really have any cold calls because I get my boss in trouble here now because he was my rep, but never had cold calls from him. I had a situation where I had a broke car, and it was actually my wife's car. She had I think it was 2011 SRX, and I was having oil consumption issues and timing chain issues, and I knew what the issue was. I just didn't want to pay $2,000 to re-ring it, and I did a bunch of research after the mock stuff failed me miserably, and I couldn't get a hold of the rep. And I found this BG thing online. I called him up, and James showed up with his Bill Nye the Science Guy kit, did his demo, and I'm the guy in the background that's at every one of our demos where you got that guy that's the non-believer, and he's sitting there
Right.
he's got that snarky look on his face going, yeah, heard that, don't believe it. And that was me. And I'm perfectly honest with you. And he fixed my wife's car, and I said, all right, thanks, have a nice day. It was another 6 months later till I had an issue with I had a Cadillac at the time too, and cold start, misfire, carbon issue. Called him up again and said, all right, come back in and do your thing. And he kind of gave it to me a little bit, told me, you're paying for the chemicals, but I'll come do it, but you got to give me the time of day. I was like, all right, I can do that. That's fair. And that's when BG finally got in the door. But it wasn't a matter of being mean. It was just I wasn't educated on what we do at the time to be able to make a move and understand it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I was more worried about getting the cars in and out. How am I going to make money? Because the dealership that I took over hadn't showed a net profit in almost 7 years, and I didn't realize
Oh,
that till I got there because I didn't. I was 27 at the time. I was young, and I was like, "Oh, cool! I'm gonna be service manager, 27, yada yada yada." And I talked a big game to get the job, and I wanted to make money. I wasn't really worried about the chemical guy.
right.
Little did I know that was going to be my best friend to make the money. So it's definitely come a long way for me.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So you went from the skeptic to now being a successful salesman yourself.
And it really comes down to education. I mean, I'm obviously have a background in training myself, but I think even from being a sales guy to a rep to whatever you want to call yourselves, I mean, training to me is the biggest part of what we do. I tell my guys all the time when I do my demos, because my demos aren't your typical smoke and burn. I tend to go overboard on the technical. I tend to get in the weeds sometimes, but I'm a firm believer you don't know what you don't know. Most techs in these shops don't want to ask the questions. They don't want to appear to their peers that they don't know a simple question. They don't want to say, oh, I didn't know we had low tension rings. So it's training is everything in my book, and you just don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, 100%. So I have a sales rep that's new to Kansas BG, but he was a chemist for like 2-3 years before coming on board with us, for BG. And it's been fun to hear his perspective on, like, has your chemistry background helped you in your accounts? Does it legitimize what you're saying to these customers? And he's pretty resoundingly said, no, it has not helped at all to legitimize, the types of things that I'm trying to tell customers that, and he's learned to, to kind of dumb it down for these guys. What is that like, coming from a technician background and a manager background, talking to that very audience?
I'd say that was probably my steepest learning curve, and it's actually sitting on my notes from yesterday because being in quarantine here, I've been taking the time to kind of reevaluate where I'm at, where my accounts are at. It's tough. Anybody that spent time in this field, where you take the tech and you want to put them on the advisor counter, right? Everything's it's a great idea. Johnny's been doing this for 10 years. He's a great tech, but he's complaining about his back and his cancer, and let's put him on the desk. In theory, it sounds great. He's got the technical. We know he can talk to customers. Let's have him sell. Well, you all know as well as I do. You take that really good tech and you put him on the counter, and Mrs. Jones comes in and goes, I got growling from my front end when I turn. Yep, you need a wheel bearing, Mrs. Jones. We'll get it right in.
Yeah.
Well, no, dude, you just lost your hour diag. You can't do that, so it's been a challenge for me because I want to get into the weeds on, okay, we're talking about GDI and we're talking about pulse width modulation and how many times we're going to inject per combustion event and why we run ultra lean and why we do this. At some stores, I can get away with that. In the beginning, I didn't realize I figured everybody knew what I knew because I went through the training I went through, and I'm like, I realized 2-3 demos into my career, I was talking way over their heads. And I'm not saying that as an arrogance thing. It's like, not everybody has the same background. I just assumed because that's what I did. That's what everybody did. And I thought I was doing them a service or a disservice rather by not going into that detail. When in reality, it's you got to judge your crowd, dial it back to what fits them, and build from there. If you're getting a glazed over look 3 minutes into a discussion about injectors, you need to go back and talk about poppet valves and get into a port injector before you get into the weeds on BDI. So that's been the most difficult thing for me is understanding that everybody's a little bit different.
Yeah. And I think that's something that a lot of BG guys go through, whether you're coming from that background or not, even when I was coming up through, BGU and stuff when I first started, I have no automotive background. And at the time, I was 22 years old, so it was hard to gain legitimacy in the customer's eyes, So I kind of tried to learn the lingo, the technical lingo that some of the more experienced guys used, and it just I think we think going into all the details on how the engine technology works, and going through every single additive that's in the can of MOA and why it's there and what it does and all that. That's all great, but it doesn't inspire confidence in customers, and I think that's resoundingly so. Your training that is based off of technical know-how, it just doesn't tend to move the needle very much.
Well, and I've learned with it. Luckily I had some pretty good success earlier on that I don't want to say I didn't work for. I got kind of lucky in some ways, which we can talk about. But I thought I needed to prove to them that because I'm a younger guy. I mean, you and I are about the same age, and I'm coming in with, I'm a master tech, I'm a service manager, and I've got all this, and they're looking at me like, dude, you're 32. I've been doing this for longer than you've been alive. And I ran into that a bit when I was doing dealer training too. But they don't really care to know what you know until they realize you're there to help them. And that really, for me, was probably one of the biggest wake up calls I had early on, which has led to my success. Is that, all right, that's great, all this stuff, that's good, but you really got to be here for them to help them succeed, whether it's generating revenue or hours or whatever the goal is, not being there just because I want to get another account because I want to be number one. I'll get to number one by helping them. Being able to see that and kind of draw the line and saying, okay, I need to change how I'm strategizing. Let's put the help focus first. The rest will come as residual. And that's, going back to that whole logic with the technician on the counter, getting them to understand that you might know what it is, but that's not what you're paid to do here. You're here to help the customer. You're the liaison now. Get the good information. Once they know you're there to help, sure, word vomit all over them with all the technical stuff that I want. Be able to help them. And that's kind of, to me, that's where I've gone with it. And I've made a few mistakes along the way and said too much during demos. And the guy's like, yeah, you know what, dude, I'm just not interested. Because I'd be in an independent in the backwoods of, wherever, and the guy's still working on, K bodies. He's not even working on anything with GDI. And I'm doing this whole great demo that I think is awesome. And he doesn't care. In his eyes, I'm not there to help him. I'm just there to tell him what I know.
So stepping back in the past a little bit, back to that management position that you took at that deal. How long were you with that GM dealer as a manager?
Just about 2 years. It was just a hair under 2 years.
And so in that 2 years, were you able to turn the numbers around?
First month I was there was the first month they showed net in 7 years. It was $362, but it was net. And there's the biggest changes there. Obviously the BG helped throughout once we got the ball rolling a little bit, because that wasn't towards probably halfway through my time there that actually happened. But It was just dedication to doing the business right. They weren't necessarily doing anything wrong before. They just weren't doing enough. They weren't, the things that we preach, ironically, they weren't doing proper MPIs. They weren't following through with the customer. Whether you had an answer or not, call the customer. Hey, Mrs. Jones, we got it in. We don't have an answer for you. I just want to let you know where you're at. As a smaller community where I was at, we're 35, 40 cars a day, and they just weren't tapping into the details. So it was interesting for me to see everything that I did to drive these guys. And it was funny because the reason it didn't work out in the long run is I was a technician driven manager versus a front end driven manager. You know what I mean? I wasn't focused on the nuts and bolts of the P&P and the process at the desk. What can I do to take care of my technicians? Because I was a technician. All the things that I used to get mad about that weren't taken care of, and I didn't understand at the time. That's what I focused on, because at the end of the day, if I'm making them happy, they're going to work for me. And that was the big thing that shop was missing, was just having somebody that they knew supported them no matter what they did, they were going to get taken care of.
So you show up, you start looking at numbers and stuff and realize like, oh, this was misrepresented to me. Like what was what was like the most shocking thing about their process or the way that they were doing business that you found?
Well, it actually, it's funny. That's got, and I laugh at it. My wife and I talked about it yesterday. Was I had red flags long before I even moved. I shouldn't say long, about a month before I came home from Florida, right? So I came up on vacation, I interviewed, I got it, great. I went back down, told my training boss in Florida, hey, bad news, I'm leaving. But I got a month. So I get a phone call like a week later from the owner. And it basically went, hey, Shaun, I appreciate taking the job. I'm glad that you're coming here. I'm excited, but I got to let you know something. Oh, okay. And you could tell it wasn't going to be what I wanted to hear. And he goes, you lost 2 techs. Mind you, there were 5 techs. You lost 2 of your top techs. I had a service manager or a service advisor walk out. You have 1 left. I think the one here is stealing. And yeah, it's basically what you signed on for is not what you're getting. And in the back of my head, I'm going, I already know you're negative. I already know you're not making money. I know I'm taking on a big challenge. I know nothing about GM. Quite frankly, I know nothing about being a manager. I just figured I could do it better than the one I had, because that's how techs think. And I'm like, well, unfortunately, I already got rid of I was renting a house. I'm like, I already turned that in. My wife's already moved home with my kid. I had 1 kid at the time. My wife's already moved home, and I got 2 weeks left. So I'll be there. And so I get there, and everything he told me was truthful. And the one advisor he had was legitimately stealing. And I went to his office after first week, and I'm like, hey, man, I got to let her go. I'm not keeping her. And he's like, you realize that leaves just you, right? And I said, yep. And he's like, well, what are you doing to yourself? And I told him, I said, Mr. So-and-so, I said, I can't rebuild a house with a weak foundation. I said, I've got an advisor that's been here for years, that knows this business in this particular store inside and out. They're cheating the numbers. Here's where they're cheating the numbers. They're lying to you. They're stealing from you. And you want me to utilize that as a pillar in my new program here? Not happening. And he said, all right, well, shoot a hole in your own battleship. Here's paddle. And I went without it. I went with me solely as the advisor, the manager, everything, for probably about a month. And it was brutal. But it gave me time to really sink my teeth into everything. Where's the issues? Where's the breakdown? What's the process? Where aren't the numbers? Why are we working on 40 cars a day now with 3 techs, which you would think would have some good return there? Why aren't we making money? And it was just poorly built labor ops. It was poorly built. I got my A tech making $30 an hour doing a free oil change and tire rotation. Oh, I just lost $12 on every single one of those. That's great. And you get free New York State inspections with every car that's bought here. All right, well, there's $21 and a half hour labor to an ATIC making 30. I paid $6 for the sticker. I paid $15 in labor. Oh, I broke nothing. You know what I mean? So I started looking at all the fine details, and that's really where I found the biggest issues in the store, was just that and nobody had taken the time to drill down the numbers and really see what was going where. And there were some other policy and procedures that I disagreed with, and that's part of the reason I'm not there anymore. But some of those things you can never change. But it was truly it was probably the worst work experience I've ever had. But it was probably where I learned the most. And truthfully, with my success I've had with BG, would not exist if I didn't go through all that. And it's kind of it's one of those double-edged swords. Like, man, I still have nightmares about waking up and going there. But had I not done that, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. So I have a bittersweet feeling about that deal, and it's truly where you really got to pay attention to what your stores are doing.
Yeah. Now, because every one of us has a store or maybe multiple stores where, when management starts being just leveling with you, like all of a sudden you're the guy that's willing to listen to their problems when you walk in. You find out things like, man, we're way in the negative for the past 3 months or whatever. Like, what
Right.
is that? Do you like try to help with those situations now in your accounts? Do you look at their numbers and try to find the discrepancies?
Yeah, and it's funny because, again, like I said, I'm going through my accounts right now because I got time at the house, and in some ways I think I get too deep. Be perfectly honest with you, because I got a fair number of my stores that have EBIS reporting through Dynatron, and I could be sitting on the couch for hours digging through their numbers, going, "What are you guys doing?" And it's interesting too, because where my store was located when I was a service manager is currently in my territory. Obviously, I don't go there for obvious reasons, and they have this thing through GM called their Piston Cup, right? And it's something through their GM rep. I forget what his actual title is, but he made it out of like old brake rotors, a camshaft, a piston. He had a little powder coat. It's kind of neat. Kind of looks like a Daytona 500 award. And every time you get it, you win it based on your KPIs. Did you meet your PACE KPIs? How many cabin filters did you sell? So on and so forth. It's got an algorithm he builds up, and okay, Shaun White's store wins it today, right? And it's a monthly thing. Along with it, he buys your guys food and all this fun stuff, and they make a big deal about it. Well, my store had never won it because they weren't very good. And ironically, like I said, if I hadn't done what I did there, it would have made this job harder. My store won it back to back for almost 7 months. So all of a sudden, here's this store in this territory that's taking down these juggernauts, because that big store I told you about, it takes 3,000 customer pay ROs a month. It's a GM store. I competed against that store as a service manager, and I was able to beat them on percentage, obviously not by volume, but by percentage, I was able to beat them. So now when I go in these stores now and I'm talking to these guys, they start putting 2 and 2 together, and they realize, oh, that was you. Yeah. So it kind of opens up that door. It kind of breaks down that barrier. Like you mentioned, you dealt with yourself. We're the same age. We're 32. We're not that old. A lot of these guys have been doing this longer than we've been alive, but they realize who I was based on that, and it opens up the door to have that conversation. Say, I realize I'm a young guy here, but I'm well studied, and not in an arrogant way, but I understand where the numbers are coming in. I understand where they're going. Let's put our heads together and see if we can fix this. Yes, I'm going to use BG in my program to help you fix it, because I ain't got to make a paycheck here too, Chief, but I'm going to help you. If you don't succeed, I don't succeed. So that's been a huge contributing factor to it. But again, on the flip side, sometimes you get in the weeds and you're working with a store you're making $1,500 a month on, and they've got you diving into their DMS reports, and you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs going, I can't fix this. This is outside my control.
Right.
I'm still learning that. I still get a lot of phone calls. Hey, can you come take a look at this? And it's like, yeah, I'll look at it. Email it to me. So it's all good. But it's definitely been able to help me get in deeper with the accounts, because they trust me with enough with the numbers to give an opinion. And more times than not, they go with it, because they know what I'm saying is truthful from my standpoint, where if they're willing to go the route I want to go, obviously I know it's going to help the BG sales, which ultimately is going to help their sales the way that we have the menu built.
Right. Now, you've been able to drastically increase the numbers coming out of your territory. And I know some of that is due to the fact that you've brought a lot of accounts on board since you started. Do you have any idea how many?
How many I've brought on? No, but I'm actually sitting with my numbers now. I've currently got 31 dealers and 68 independents. And out of those independents, I'd say probably 30 to 35 of those are like an active buying religiously. Maybe not huge numbers, but there's an order once a month, if you will. And I'd say,
Mm-hmm.
a good 20 of those, 30 of those are probably, I'll call you when I need stuff, and it's a couple $100 here and there. But, out of those 31 dealers, I've got one dealer group that I picked up about a little over a year and a half ago now, maybe not quite a year and a half. And they make up about close to 50% of my number is that one dealer
Wow.
group.
How
And then
many
I've,
how many rooftops do you have through them?
rooftops, they've got 13 rooftops. No, 11 rooftops. 11 rooftops. They got three resale centers. They've got a Ford commercial fleet shop, and then they've got obviously the residual or new car dealers. But they've got some pretty good size dealers. Like their GM dealer, they have two locations technically. They're kitty corner from each other on an intersection. One is just a quick lube. They bought out like an old Meineke or Monroe, and they turned that into their quick lube. So if they call a VDC for an appointment for oil change tire rotation, it gets dumped over to quick lube, or if it's anything other than that, it goes to main shop. Between the two of those, they're ripping off 3,000 customer pay hours a month. So I mean,
Wow.
there's huge potential, and truthfully, until about 2 months ago, which is timing, this whole virus thing is killing me, because 2 months ago we really finally figured it out, and we started cranking out of there. And now we shut the engine down. We got to restart it. So,
So there's a good question for you. So it was a store that had a ton of potential, but just really wasn't clicking. Like what changed in there that got things moving?
well, truthfully, it was me. I'll be honest with you. I'm not saying I'm taking all the credit for it, but I don't want to say I got complacent because I haven't really been doing this long. I've become complacent, but I came into a territory that was the worst in the state, quite frankly, and it had the highest vehicle registration density out of all the territories in the state, which is really the last reason I took the job. Like, all right, well, it's the worst in the state, but it has the most cars, then it should be the best. And I got this dealer group 6 months in, and I started cranking 400,000, and last year I did 850 on the calendar year, and they were doing 10 grand a month. And I'm like, oh, cool. 10 or not. Yeah, 10 grand a month. I'm like, cool. 10 grand a month out of one store. That's great. And I started looking at the numbers and I'm like, well, no, you're the worst in the group based on penetration. That's bad. You're only number one in total sales because of your pure volume. And I'm sitting there going, all right, well, if you got the most volume, if we get that penetration to where the rest of them are, holy crap. And I went in there and I had a meeting with the GM and I sat down with him and I said, look, I said, I've been failing you. I said, I haven't been doing what I need to do to put your numbers where they need to be. Here's your numbers. Here's where you're at. Here's where you should be. Here's what I want to do to get you there. Are you on board? And he's like, yeah,
So
dude, whatever. Go ahead.
so it was kind of one of those situations where it's a big store that's not hitting their potential, but things are going well enough in there that you're like, okay, well, I'll just ride this out for the time being and work on these other stores.
Yeah, because growing as quickly as I did has been a double-edged sword. And it's great that we went from, 200,000 a year out of a territory to 850 in 27 months. That's awesome, right? When you look on paper, holy crap. Well, then you realize that it's one guy covering 400 square miles out of his van, and I've got all these new pop-ups. Well, 75% of my accounts, in my opinion, are still virgin accounts. They're less than 2 years old. So they all require a lot of attention. And in some ways, I spread myself too thin, not realizing it because I'm still new to this. And okay, I got to be here. Okay, here's your product. Here you go. Oh, hey, nice job last week. You sold whatever. And I'd leave. And, I'm hitting my quote, I'm hitting my number, and all that's great. And then I kind of start drilling in my stuff going, you're not hitting where you need to be, just like you said. And that's where the conversation came up. And I just fell on my own sword. Whether it was my fault or not, I'm still responsible for it. And
So the manager, he goes, okay, all right, well,
that's the other
I'm
interesting
assuming he
dynamic with that
agreed to.
store. They've got they've got more chiefs than they have Indians, and the actual service managers, he's come around, but he was good friends with a mock guy that was there for years, and who's this guy coming in here from PG, and he's half my age, and blah blah blah, that whole thing. And I kind of go right to the GM in this particular store because he and I have the same ideas. We think the same way. We're both very, let's go, let's get it done. And I told him, I said, look, we're going to go work the lanes together. What do you mean? I said, next week, you and me are going to be in a lane at both stores 1 day a week. We're going to be there for half the day, and we're just going to observe for the first day, and then I need you to back me up. I said, two things need to happen. One, you need to take the reins and tell them what to do, or let me take the reins, trust what I have to say, and back me up. And he says, well, I'm going to let you do your thing, and I'll back you up. We really kind of had a heart to heart, basically tell them, look, yeah, this is a BG program. It's backed by BG. It's supported by me. But when I leave here, you got to carry the baton. And we kind of we went back and forth on a few things. He gave me some expectations for me that he thought I should have been doing and wasn't, and vice versa. And I went from doing about 15 to 1800 a week in there at the main store to putting almost $3,000 in the main store, and going from about $2,000 at the quick lube to 25 to 3. So I think last month we did like 21 ish, not quite. So that was really the change, was me sitting there going, all right, it's not them, it's me. And if they're not going to do it, I need to make it happen.
So you go in there with the manager to observe, like, what is it that you saw that needed to change?
Process. I would drill every single bit of what was quote unquote wrong with it is process. The one thing they did really well with the mod product was just their tank dump. I replaced it with a 2086, right? They're moving 500 of these things a month, up to 600 during the summer. And that's all they were selling. But I'm sitting there going, all right, well, 500, 2086 a month. All right. Okay. It's not a bad number. And I started looking at the rest of the stuff, and I'm like, guys, well, what if we made 25% of that into a 6592 or a KF65 kit, right? And that's, once they saw the difference in selling 500 no labor driven 2086s for $18 to selling, 25 labor driven fuel services, just the difference in their numbers was a huge wake up call. They weren't even thinking about it. They wanted a quick sale. They wanted to take the order. Oh, we're too busy. Well, you slow down a little bit, spend the time with the customer like we preach, and your numbers went through the roof. And I think that was one of the biggest wake-up calls. They did change. It was my recommendation that luckily he developed the pay plan, but they changed the pay plans for their managers. Like I told you, they have more chiefs than they have Indians, and their pay plan was kind of wonky, if you ask me, because it was more salary driven, not so much based on performance. Well, they flipped that on its head too, and now it's more based on performance, less on salary. So
are they judged on, like, what metrics are they judged on?
Now they're judged on, the typical ones, your CSI, your customer survey stuff. They weren't based on any upsells. They changed it to ELR, number of one-line ROs that went to multiple line ROs. It's still a little convoluted, if you ask me. I like pay plans that fit on a sticky note. But they flipped it now where it's less salary and it's more based on what you're doing. And one of the big contributors to that was BG sales. We're a heavy modifier in the pay plan as far as, okay, you're getting 1%, or you're getting 3%. Based on your BG sales, this is where you're going to fall. So changing that along with processing the drive and getting the active delivery and the walk-arounds, and based on your service history, this is what you're due for, word tracks and all that. That's really what started driving that program.
Now, are they that group in particular? I mean, are they menu driven?
No, that's something we're still kind of working on, and some stores like the menu, some stores don't like the menu. And they've got a mix of import and domestic, and that's really the next step we need to go, is get some sort of menu in there. I do have a smart VMA pilot store in one of their GM stores, and they're paying for it to have an icon on their computer screen. They don't use it. I don't remember the last time they used a smart VMA presentation. Get to see it as another thing to do. And then that's kind of where the next level this has got to go for me, as far as getting a menu, what's packaged is going to sell. Start getting a 5K, a 10K, 15K, whatever you want to have back in the stores, I think is going to be important. But currently they don't have it.
So I had kind of an interesting conversation last week with a manager. We're getting ready to put smart VMA into the local Honda dealer. They have two separate facilities, one on the east side, one on the west side. And it's the only Honda dealer, the only decent sized Honda dealer within, I don't know, basically west of Kansas City. So it's a big store, a lot of cars. So they got this new manager that's a young guy, and then they have a lane manager who's been there forever. And this guy's like Rain Man. Like, he knows every single oddity about Honda, service. He knows labor times. He knows, op codes, everything about this dealer's program. But he's really just a numbers guy, and he also writes.
All
So we're going into the store. We're supposed to train the two managers on Smart VMA. So we sit down, we're doing our typical thing. Like we've got the both of them sitting there. We're walking them through how to pull up a menu, how to search for a customer, parking it, completing it, all of that, the nuts and bolts. This guy, the lane manager, is asking a lot of crazy questions about 2004 and older Hondas, it's 6/10 for a cabin filter. That a lot of that kind of detail.
Right. The
So
one-off car that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. We're talking about 15, 20-year-old vehicles. But the service manager at some point, and it's like it's shame on me for not doing this myself. But he says, "Are we done with this? Because I've got questions." Like, okay, sure, let's talk about that. He looks at the lane manager. He goes, "You and I need to role play out how this is going to fit into the advisor process, because we've got to make sure that this doesn't, throw a wrench in the process that we've already got set up." So we start talking through it and throwing some ideas around. When should we present the menu? Should we do it on the tablet or should we do it on the desktop? At what point do we put this in front of the customer and ask for the sale? And it ended up we pulled in a couple of cars and we did like a full run through with a walk around, and then greeting the customer, the walk around, menu presentation, back at the desk, writing them up. And, it really just struck me like, I spend all this time blasting customers for not presenting menus, right? It's like, this is how it works. How it works. It's easy. Why don't you guys just sell them? But I never really get into the weeds on like, how does this fit into their process that they're already using?
Right.
And we need
does
to
it fit?
define this. Right. And it was interesting. And when we first started, we're talking about word tracking and stuff. And when we started out, it was like, okay, Mr. Customer, you're at 60,000 miles. At 60,000 miles, we recommend A, B, C, and D. And this is really good because it comes with a protection plan, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the typical 3 to 5 minute word track that you train on and no one ever uses.
Right. Sounds really good, but it ain't going to happen.
Yeah. So by the time we boiled this thing all the way down to like our prescribed set in stone process at the store, it was, we greet the customer, we do the walk around, we get their mileage and their VIN number. At that point, we pull up their menu as we're walking to the desk, and our word track is going to be, Mr. Customer, you're at 60,000 miles. That's a really important service interval for your vehicle. Here's all the things that we recommend. We have 3 different packages. If you're planning on keeping your car long term, we recommend getting at least the middle one. Look this one over while I write you up here, and let me know which one you want.
Right.
And that's it. That's what we decided. And I say we. This is the managers, going back and forth on this, but that's what we decided fits into the process, isn't too cumbersome, and we can ask like every advisor to use.
Right.
I don't know. It was just interesting because I just think about like how many menu accounts we have that are doing the exactly what you talked about. They're not presenting. It's an icon on their desktop that they never touch. And I haven't gone there with those customers yet, And
it's interesting because I'll be honest with you. I mean, if you're looking through my stores, I have one store that I religiously reorder paper menus for, the trifolds. I've got one store that has Smart VMA that doesn't use it. And I don't know if I don't want to say it's my disbelief in a menu, but I believe they work. But I think they almost work better things that are packaged sell. Like I was saying earlier, okay, you got a 2086 and a 115 built into your 5K. Well, now they're selling 5Ks. Oh, you're here for your 5,000 mile. Here's what you get. So it's not necessarily on a paper menu, but it's built into the intervals. I've got some good success with that where they know and we know on the inside that it's a quote unquote menu sale, but the customer's just coming in for their 5K, their 15K, and this is just what you're getting with it. You know what I mean?
So it's basically presented as the standard option.
Right. These are your options. You know,
And
I
then
have
if you hit an objection, they go backwards from there.
right, or why is that so much more than, my guy down the road? Well, here's why. Here's what you're getting. And then they sell the added value to it. And I've got one guy at my Toyota store. He's been doing this. I don't know how long Jimmy's been doing this. He's been a service advisor for a long time. And he's like, yeah, I don't want to hear your fancy word tracks. Watch this. And this lady, he can do it every time, and he kills me. I'm like, you just do my advisor training for me because I got nothing to tell you, and you're good. And she comes in, and he goes, hey, Mrs. Jones, I see you're in for your oil change. He goes, looks like you've got about 45,000 miles on your RAV4. Based on that mileage, you're due for our entry-level high mileage oil change, what that is. And he goes into a 6579 spiel. We're going to put a cleaner in. We clean out all the gums and varnishes. We're going to go ahead and top treat that oil because you're, like you said, you're getting that high mileage, and you're planning on keeping your car. He just tells her, you're planning on keeping your car. So we're going to take care of it right for you. It's only an extra 45 bucks. I'll get it done for you today. There's the waiting room. And I watch him do this, and it's every time. And customers will pull out it's a lease, because I got a high lease penetration in my area. It's, it's north of 70%. And he just does it with the same thing with us. Oh, it's a lease car. We're going to make sure we get the power performance and fuel economy out of it throughout the life of your lease so you get your bang for your buck. I know you're not keeping it, but we want to keep that fuel mileage. There's the waiting room.
So this is at a Toyota store?
That's at a Toyota store.
How many advisors are there?
They work rotating shifts, and they got 2 advisors and 6 techs, and then they flip flop. They do like a 410 rotating, like having a hell week on either end. But
so the other advisor, does he do that same process?
He's got his. It's funny because with the 2 teams, they've got one seasoned guy on each team, if you will, and then they've got a younger guy. And I can tell you which team's working by going to the parts department. And okay, Jimmy's on when all the oil products are gone. And when Cracker's on, every one of the drive lines gone, the transmission kits are gone, and they've got their own things that they like to sell. And even within their teams, they like to sell their own things. Jimmy's the oil guy. I'll let him worry about all the oil stuff. I'm going to handle all the a la carte services. All right. And they haven't really adopted it because I think it takes a fair amount of confidence to have that word track, just like when you're cold calling. Some people cold call really well because they just have that natural ability to walk into an uncomfortable situation and come out on top. The other guy might have better information, but he's not comfortable doing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of where this guy falls in, is he's been doing it so long, it's just natural to him, and he doesn't care what he's selling, he's going to be that way.
So this kind of ties into an ongoing discussion that I've been having with some people about advisor word tracking, right? Because if we had our way, everybody would be the guy that you just described, right?
That'd be
A
amazing.
confident, assertive, assumptive closer, that just, no nonsense, no big pitch. He just assumes the sale and lets the customer ask questions and object if need be, right?
Yep.
But I feel like we don't have a lot of those people. Like there's just not a lot of people at the desk that are confident and assertive and are going to do an assumptive close in a lot of cases.
But I think that goes back to the beginning of our conversation today, is it's all training. It's every single department in the dealerships now, and it's probably one of my bigger frustrations is, I take that same big Chevy store, and I've had recent luck with them being a little more assertive on my end because most of those guys are my age, but I've quote unquote done a lot more than them, so I can lean on them. Go, guys, look, I'm the same age as you. I get it, but let's do this. Let me teach you a few things that I've done that have been successful. And by the time we're done with a 15, 20-minute side training, if you will, they're like, nobody's ever spent that time with me. And these guys have been doing this for 5 years. They're, as far as the desk goes, the average tenure is 4 years. So these are their senior guys going, nobody's ever done that with me. What's your onboarding process? Look, they hire them, they throw them in a lane and hope they survive. And I see
Right.
I see that so often. I'm sure everybody listening is going to go, yeah, that's every dealer I got. But we look at the industry and we go, okay, why don't we have the Jimmys that I just talked about? Well, Jimmy's been doing this for years, and he went to school of hard knocks. Right? He learned it the hard way. He learned it by losing sales, by losing paychecks. Where we take the time to do some sort of training with these guys on a religious basis where, all right, the market's changing. We're shifting to, okay, what did Mikey B say yesterday in the webinar? We got 9.5 million leases back into the marketplace in 2019, right? I think that's the number he gave us. That's
Right.
9.5 million opportunities. to practice. But nobody ever gives the guys the confidence to want to practice to see the success. And the same thing with lube techs. You hire a lube tech, right? He was washing dishes yesterday. Today he's changing oil on a Corvette and he screws up. Well, whose fault's that? You know? And that's a little bit of a rant there on the training side, but that just goes back to is we have to do our part in the business to make sure that if we're expecting them to sell the stuff, whether it's a menu, whether it's a word track like Jimmy, or how do you get there? I don't think the dealers are set up or prepared or willing in some cases to do that, or quite frankly, don't know how. And that's
Right.
kind of a place where I get a little bit into the weeds again on spending too much time in an account because I know if I don't do it, they're not going to do it. So I guess I'm going to do it.
So let me ask you this, okay? Because I had a conversation with Casey Stanton last night, who's a sales rep in like northwestern Wisconsin, rural territory, But he was telling me about a store that he has it's out in the middle of nowhere between like Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and Minneapolis. Which
right where that's at.
Yeah, right. It's rural, to say the least. This is like a $500 to $600 a month CPRO count store, so not a big place. And he was telling me that this has turned into a $10,000 a month account, which, God, I've got stores like that all over my territory. If I could get $10,000 out of them, that would be amazing.
$500 to $600 CP a month. That's probably 90% of my stores, so my dealers. They fall in that.
Well, Casey was telling me that, I was asking him, okay, well, every time you hear about an account like that, it's like, okay, well, what are they doing? How do they do it? So it goes back to process and training. But, as we were talking about it, let me ask you this. What do you think is the main reason that advisors don't sell?
I don't think they're educated themselves on what they're doing. I really feel that way. I don't think they either think they know too much or they're just not educated on it.
Well, let's assume, okay, this is a store that you've worked in. Okay. You've trained with this advisor. You've spent the time there. It's a store where you've done your due diligence. Right. Why do you think that advisor continues to not sell?
Now you put me on the spot. Yeah, I think there are a couple reasons. I mean, I guess it's situational, but depending on if management's actually on board with what's going on in the program, because I've seen that. I've had managers actually tell them, "Yeah, BG guys gone here, don't sell. I don't want you pushing my customers."
That could always be.
Rural community. We don't want to look like we're trying to take shirts.
I kind of think that a lot of it is just the anxiety associated with being in a sales scenario, right? I mean, it's uncomfortable to ask people for money, to ask them to buy things that they didn't intend to buy, And I think that anxiety is a lot of why our advisors that aren't the guy you're talking about, right? They're not assertive, they're not confident, and they never wanted to be a salesperson, but this is the job they have now. I think a big part of getting these guys to step out on a limb and start trying to sell is relieving that anxiety. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do that, right? You do training like you're talking about. You can build confidence by making sure they understand what they're selling. You can put tools in front of them like menus and dab loop trays and things like all of that is meant to aid them and boost their confidence so that they ask. Because ultimately, we know if they ask in any sort of way, they're probably going to sell a decent amount of them.
Right.
But so Casey's approach with this account, it was really, it just got me. I've been thinking about it ever since, but their whole process is based around asking permission and upfront contracts, meaning initially customer comes in, we do the walk around, right? Say, Mr. Customer, you're at 60,000 miles. Do you want me to go over what your vehicle's due for at this mileage, or do you want me to skip it?
Right.
Any of us that have been doing this for a long time, automatically we're like, whoa, skip it. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not a good approach. But the proof's in the pudding, right? These guys are doing that and it's successful. Most customers, there's two responses you're going to get, right? It's either, well, what's due, or no, I just want the oil change. Well, the guy that says I just want the oil change is a big part of that overall anxiety, right? Because if you're 30 seconds into your 2-minute BG pitch with that guy and he's rolling his eyes and staring at his watch and stuff like that, like that's the discomfort that we're talking about, right?
Right.
Or that's the guy that's going to try to make you feel like an idiot or a scam artist for trying to sell him something. So one of the things, and this is kind of a Sandler deal that, some of these guys have told me about, is like getting to the no quick. So like it's
get to the no to get to the yes.
Right. So for that advisor who's not confident, it's, when you get that guy that you're not going to persuade, that tells you no right off the bat, it is acceptable, it's okay, and it's expected for you to move on. Okay? Now, your guy that you're talking about there at Toyota, we have those guys, here and there. Those guys probably are going to push the envelope a little further. But for the average advisor who's not confident, giving them permission to go, okay, and move on. I think that relieves some of that tension.
Right.
So
absolutely.
The next part of this whole thing that he's telling me about is that it's all built around, we're not selling, we're telling. So, he says, okay, look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over all the things that your car is due for. And when it's all done, if you want to do some of it, if you want to do all of it, if you want to pick and choose, it's up to you. It doesn't matter to me either way, but here's what it's due for. So start to finish, you go through all of it and then finish with, how would you like us to proceed?
Right. The whole 3P presentation type idea.
Right. And so, I mean, kind of what he was explaining is that at that point, a lot of customers will purchase the whole list. Some of them will pick and choose. You might get a few here and there that say, I just want the oil change or whatever. Whatever that decision is, though, it is 100% that customer's. No one's persuaded them. No one's coerced them. No one's tricked them into buying more than they paid for. Like, they own that decision from start to finish.
Right.
So when they leave, having spent $500 that they weren't planning on, they're not sitting in their car on the way home going, how in the world did I end up $500 lighter? They made that decision and they own it. You know?
Yeah, I do a similar thing. I've started doing with my advisor training and it's not exactly actually like that, a little bit better than what I'm doing. But when I tell my younger advisors, because they'll say the same thing, well, I'm not comfortable selling. I wouldn't buy it myself. So how do you expect me to sell it? Well, one, we need to get you confident in the product, and I need to spend some time with you so you know what you're doing, whether it's BG related or not. Like the kid, well, I would never buy a cabin filter. Well, he didn't understand what the purpose was. But I always tell him, guys, assume Mrs. Jones is coming in for a check engine light, right? I said, the conversation looks like this. Mrs. Jones, I see you're in for your check engine light today. That's great. We're going to go ahead and get that in the shop, figure out what that's going on with it. I just want to let you know we're going to go take a look at the car. We're going to see what else it needs. Once we figured out what your light's on for you, I'll be in touch with you and we can go from there. Primary line item always comes first. I always refer to it as setting the stage. Set the stage. Let them know you're going to come and tell them what the car needs. Because otherwise now you're here for check engine light, great. And you come out, it needs a O2 sensor for your check engine light. And by the way, now you look like you're the sleazeball selling, trying to sell them the whole wallet flash. So if you set the stage and tell them, we're going to look at your primary concern, anything that's safety or immediate is going to come first, and then let's take a look at what else you're due for. That's along the same lines, but I like that approach a little bit better, asking for the permission.
Yeah, I like the idea of framing it that way, though.
Yeah, because then there's you don't have to worry about the wife getting home and the husband going, well, he took advantage of you. Well, that was her decision, or vice versa, whatever.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. I don't know. This stuff just all got my wheels turning, thinking about like this Honda store. They were supposed to launch on menus this week, and because we're all on lockdown, we're not doing that, obviously, but it's just got me really reconsidering the way I want to talk to the advisors about it, because I know I've got 2 advisors there that are going to be assertive and are going to push through and ask for the sale,
Right.
But then I've got a bunch of others that are probably not going to ever be that guy.
And I almost wonder too, and I've had this conversation with a lot of my younger advisors, is they almost don't realize when they take the job that you're commission sales.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they look at it that way. They just look, I'm just an advisor, I'm an order taker. Well, no. I'm sure you've heard this before, but I always relate it back to a waitress. A service advisor is no different than a waitress or a waiter. How are they paid? A small salary and a percentage of total ticket. Look at it. Look at an advisor. Typically you're a light salary and a percentage of total ticket based on the variables of what you upsell, based on your menus and your specials and your drinks and all that, right? And once I explain it to them that way, the light kind of goes off and like, you're right. And I was like, so why aren't you offering? That's your job. They can say no. That's their $500, $600, $800 a month car note, not yours. Let them decide how they want to take care of their car. It's your job to offer them what they ethically need. I think I said this before. It's just as unethical to oversell it as to undersell. And that's
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. It's just that kind of stuff. Just, I think that's my favorite part of all the things that we do is just, brainstorming and thinking of new ways to break through to those people,
And now you got 2 weeks to sit home and think about it.
Right. So that kind of brings me to the last thing I wanted to ask you about, being that you're big on social media and stuff like that, you have some interesting ideas about keeping in contact with your customers through all this?
Yeah, it's as of Monday this week. I've been off the road since Friday last week, and I kind of taken the stance as I'm not the BG guy this week. I'm not the BG guy next week. I can't really sell from home. I mean, I can. I sold some things, but when I looked at the big picture, I'm here for support for these guys right now. I've had some conversations on the phone with every account that I have, from owners to owners' wives and GMs and all. I've talked to pretty much everybody I can get a hold of, and if you saw some of the posts I put today and yesterday, is you can legitimately hear the fear in these people's voice. They're not sure how they're going to weather the storm, or if they're going to be open when this is all said and done. New York being kind of the New York City being the epicenter, we're feeling the ripple effect in New York State because unfortunately we're attached. It's been tough. So I basically have reached out to all these guys via phone and social media, just kind of trying to be that silver lining for them, where they know they got somebody that can lean on, that understands their business and what I can do to help them from home. This morning was a perfect example. I've got I can't take credit for starting it, but the Jasper rep that was out here when I started a 20 group that was supported by Jasper. This guy has since moved on, and two of the lead shops and myself were talking. I'm like, guys, we can't let this die. This is a good thing. We get together once a month, we strip ranks, we strip logos, and we just talk about business. What's working, what's not. Joe over here, you sold 50 fuel services last month, and you're a mile down the road and you can't sell any. Not the demographic, not the area. It's what are you doing? So, and we talk about everything from family stuff with owning a shop right down to me being on the road for 10, 11 hours a day and how you get it done. And like this morning at 6 o'clock this morning, we had a Zoom meeting. We all hopped on, and obviously this whole virus thing was the topic of discussion, and what are we doing and how are we going to get through it? And it's really just this last couple of weeks has been support system for them. Without them making through this whole thing confidently and being open at the end of it, let's face it, it does us no good as far as a BG guy. So it's been posting as much positive stuff as I can and just being there for them, And I think it's going to go longer for me in the long run than just being, all right, I'm home, have a nice day. I'm going to go sit
Right.
on my place,
I definitely think that there's going to be a lot of their other partners that are going to take a vendor approach and just say, well, I'm off for a couple weeks here. I'll talk to you next month.
Well, it's funny you say that, because there's a core group of us, and then there's actually two different meetings. They actually created called IPAS, which is Independent Professional Automotive Services. They actually got together a local community college, and they actually created a independent shop specific curriculum that entails an internship within these stores. And that's actually part of that college's curriculum now that launches coming up this next year, I think. And that's how in depth these guys are as far as making sure that we get some of the good students. Because you think about the college programs that most of the kids go, I want dealer. That's where the $100,000 a year is, right? Well, then the independents are kind of getting left alone. So those guys have created that, and it's one of the things they brought up today because I'm one of their core sponsors, if you will. I mean, there's no money exchange. It's just I'm one of the me and one other vendor are the only two that are invited every time. And if the job getting together, we're there. And one of the main topics of discussion was thumbing through vendor files on the next 2 weeks and figuring out who's staying and who's not. They're taking this as a first quarter reboot on 2020, kind of like Mikey B said yesterday. They're trying to find that opportunity in this, going, okay, I've got time. Who's just coming and pushing the wheel weights to the back of the bucket and stacking them in front and selling me another box? Who's coming in here and going, hey, you got product on your shelf, it's not moving. Why? Let's fix the reason. Is it the wrong product? Is it, you know what I mean? Kind of like what we do. And
right.
They're planning on stripping and thinning out, because they need to financially. But I'm sure my group's not the only guys thinking that. We're just a bunch of guys in Western New York. I'm sure there's a lot of independents out there and even dealers that are going, all right, is my BG guy doing what he's supposed to be doing? Why am I sitting on $1,000, $1,500, $8,000 worth of product and he's not here? I'm making sure that I'm the last one on their mind when it comes to where they're going to thin the herd. And it's a little selfish, I guess, if you will. But on the flip side, I also want to make sure that when they have a question, I'm there for them. I'll leave the name of the place out of it because it's not important, but I had a place call me, a larger place, that says, hey, are you doing anything for deferred on payments or interest or blah, blah, blah to help us get through this? And I explained kind of my stance on it. I was like, well, no, long and short of it, no. And they said, you know what, Shaun? He goes, I can appreciate that because you've been here for us. I'm going to go ahead and thin out everybody else first. If absolutely necessary, have to do something.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit off camera here beforehand, and I think that we as reps and distributors need to be ready for those conversations right now, because I know I've gotten a couple of inquiries this week, and I've heard the same thing from some other guys. And the long and short of it is that, okay, they want some sort of a discount or whatever. Well, let's say we discount a fuel kit $5. That means almost nothing to them in the grand scheme of it. When they're clearing 100 or.
But that $5 is probably spiff. So let's talk about what are we really pulling out of here? Are we pulling out spiff or are we pulling an actual discount?
Right. Well, and I don't know. I just think that, we all need to be ready for that conversation with customers, because
I think the biggest thing they need to be ready, and obviously it's hopefully not talking about my pay grade, but the biggest thing they need to understand is, you look at some of these dealers, yeah, you're net 30, but how often do they actually pay? You look at your dealer accounts and they're 30, 60, 90 days out. Well, you're already doing what you're asking me to do. You know what I mean? So I think that everybody just kind of has to realize that everybody's hurting with what we're doing and kind of stick together and make it through it and do what we can.
Yeah, this conflict hasn't spared anyone except for maybe Netflix.
Well, no, because the passwords are getting shared. I have Disney Plus, which I didn't have before, but I don't even know the password.
Right.
But
that would be a good drinking game at a party, is like, all right, who here pays for Netflix? Who pays for Disney Plus?
That's what my brother-in-law and I was like, all right, I got this and this. What do you got? And we're bartering back and forth on who's got, all right, my kids will be entertained by that, and yours will like this. So here's this. But no, it's definitely a tough time in the industry right now, and I think April's going to be a little scary. But I think the reality of it is we just got to be there for the people we have to make sure we don't lose them, and it kind of gives us a chance, because we always say, writers say, oh, I don't have time to sell. Well, how often do reps catch ourselves saying, well, I don't have time to do that because X, Y, and Z, right? Well, those of us who are stuck at home, guess what? We got time.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of where I took the first couple of days and actually slept in. And now it's back. Okay, where am I at? Taking through numbers and, using Solentris for what the value it has. And there's been phenomenal. I didn't even know you could do half the stuff you could do. But it's reset it and go back out there and hit it.
Well, before we go here, you mentioned doing some online meetings and stuff this morning. Do you have a suggested attire for those meetings?
No. Um, yeah, I'll
You
tell
want to you
everybody
want to
because
share a story?
I'll share a story. It's a good story. So I think you should save this for the bad demo thing you're working on. But no, I was
Oh, right.
so 6 o'clock Zoom meeting this morning with all my independent guys. My kids are sleeping in. They're 3 and 5. Will be 3 and 5 in April. And so I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna take a shower because that's early. I'm just gonna do my hair. I shaved yesterday. I'm good. And I just tossed a t-shirt on. I'm sitting there with my camera on, and we're doing our meeting, and we're almost done with this thing. And my 3-year-old wakes up. She starts walking over to me, and I'm sitting there, oh, crap, I got speakers on. I don't have microphones in. I got nothing to safeguard myself. Whatever she says is they're going to hear. And it's kind of like the newscaster where you never, are they wearing pants underneath the desk or not? My daughter walks over to me and goes, Daddy, why aren't you wearing pants? And I'm sitting there on this meeting with 10, 15 of these guys that I do business with, and I talk about their numbers. I know their financials. I know their personal, all their information. And my daughter steamrolls me and tells them I'm not wearing pants sitting there at the kitchen table drinking coffee and doing a seminar. So I guess my advice on that would be is if you got little kids, either have your earbuds in so they're not going to hear what they say, or wear pants.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
At least I had
Well,
underwear on, so
yeah, that's true.
it could have got a lot worse.
Man. Well, it was good talking to you, man. I appreciate you sparing some time for me today, and good luck with the quarantine. Hopefully, this is short lived, and we can get back to work.
Yeah, and if you ever need me to try out for Elsa or Anna on Frozen 2, I'm pretty sure I've got the word track down, so we can do a podcast on that.
There we go. I like it.
Well, appreciate it, and best wishes to you.
All right. Have a good one, Shaun.
You too.